Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today you're checking out a Magicka Templar PvP build. This is updated for the Wrathstone DLC, and I'm calling this build BACKLASH. This is a heavy armor Magicka Templar setup, and it's great for both melee DPS and ranged. And we've got great healing and defenses, so your survivability is off the charts as well. So if you're looking for a strong build for PvP and Battlegrounds, that's also a lot of fun to play, I think this is going to be the build for you. We'll go over the stats, the gear, the skills, as well as what's changed with the Magicka Templar with this new patch, all coming up next. Alright, so let's go ahead and jump into the stats first. Quick disclaimer, I'm not fully min-maxed here. I have a couple of traits that I need to replace. And your stats could definitely improve with max level Undaunted, for example. But this is what we have to start with. About 36k max Magicka, 19k health. That'll be about 22, 23k in PvP. 16k stamina is looking very good. For our Magicka recovery, that actually goes up with our potion. And also through one of our buffs. So with the potion, it's 1650. But with our rune buff, that's actually over 2k, so that's pretty solid. Spell damage and spell critical do go up, so we have a Backplar Berserker Glyph, for example. We also have one of our sets giving us an extra 400 spell damage, which is not going to be reflected on the stat sheet, so just keep that in mind. So with our potion, minor sorcery, and our Berserker Glyph, let's just check. 2800, so that'll be about 3300 fully buffed spell damage. And spell critical is looking really good at 46% with that buff active, the spell critical buff off of our Backplar, which gets procced right there. Considering this is a heavy armor build, that's pretty good. For the resistances, just really quick, within the rune, so 28,000 spell resistance, 26, almost 27,000 physical, and 2,400 crit resist is looking very good. So I have put all my points into max Magicka, 64 points there. I am using the spring-loaded infusion, which is a tri-stat drink, and that's important for one of our sets, which I will get to. For the Mundus here, I went with the Thief, and you can kind of choose different things here. You could go with more spell damage. You could go with Magicka recovery. I like the Thief though because I am doing heavy armor, and so my crit was a little bit low, so I just wanted to boost that by a little bit. That's getting us close to 50% spell critical on the heavy armor setup, so that is good. Stage 4 Vampire, that's because I think Mistform is still really useful on a Magicka Templar, and the extra damage resistance when you're low health, the extra recoveries, I think it really plays well with the Magicka Templar build. Let's see what else. For the potions, very important here. You can use the just basic Alliance War spell potions. This gives you the only buff you really need, which is major sorcery. You can also have tripod slotted just for when you're defensive and you need a little bit more health and stamina recovery. I like being able to switch to those, but majority of the time we will want that spell power buff from our potion. And last but not least, the race here. So I did change my race for this build from Argonian to High Elf. And I think High Elf really is going to be good for a damage-focused Magicka Templar build, either PvP or PvE, actually. But for PvP, I do kind of like this passive, the way they reworked it. So Spell Recharge gives us Magicka or Stamina back, based on whichever is lowest. So if you are sprinting, if you're roll dodging, your stamina will be low and you'll be getting that back every 6 seconds. You also get 5% less damage when you're channeling. So think about channeling sweeps, channeling your Templar Execute, channeling a heavy attack from the Lightning Staff. In all of those cases, you'll be getting a nice little damage reduction from the High Elf, so I think that's good. Seerbane's Boon, you just get the max Magicka 2000, which is obviously good. And then a nice boost for our spell damage here by 258. I think this lets you run a variety of Mundus stones if you want. So like I chose the Thief, for example, because I had enough spell damage already as a High Elf. So I really like High Elf. That would be my top choice here. All right, let's jump into the sets next. This build is kind of an updated build from my Invincible build that I did a few patches ago. And I'm calling it an update because I kept this main set because I really like it on Magicka Templar. It's the Innate Axiom set. So your bonuses here, you get Max Magicka, Max Stamina, which is great for PvP. You get Spell Critical, which is also nice, and then about 400 spell or weapon damage to your class abilities. So the reason why I really like this on Magicka Templar especially is because we run basically no weapon skills for the way that I've set this up. It's all class skills. All of your offensive skills are class-based. All of your heals are class-based. So all of those are going to scale up and be stronger with this set. It's very easy to craft. It's from Clockwork City. I believe it's 2 traits only. And yes, very easy to get your hands on as long as you have that DLC. And it just adds a lot of power to the Magicka Templar build. So I'm going to be running this on my weapons and 3 body pieces. I went with the Lightning Staff front bar. You can choose Flame Staff if you prefer. You could do something like Dual Swords, which I have done in the past, but I switched over to Lightning Staff this patch just because I like the extra sustain that I can get from heavy attacking. It's also a lot easier to proc my poisons. I am using poisons, so I can proc those from a range if I want to, just to add some extra damage over time. And again, it is a channel, so it's going to give us a little bit more damage reduction as a High Elf. For my front bar staff here, I went with the Precise Lightning Staff. I felt that I could do Precise instead of Nirnhoned just because of the High Elf having that extra bonus spell damage this patch. You can think about other traits like Precise would be really good. Maybe Infused if you wanted to use a glyph. But I did decide to go with Poisons here, just the double damage Poisons. And again, with that Precise trait and the Thief Mundus, I'm getting close to 50% spell crit on a heavy armor build, which is really nice for damage. For the back bar, I'm using the Infused Restoration Staff. I like this personally. I know some people like Sword and Shield, and you can do Sword and Shield on the back bar if you like. The reason why I like the Resto Staff, though, is it's a lot easier to proc this Infused Berserker glyph from a range and then just gap close and have that spell damage already active. It'll also give you some nice Magicka sustain back if you happen to be on this bar and do a heavy attack. But like I said, Sword and Shield, definitely a good option too. If you want to be a little bit tankier on the back bar, definitely think about that. And then just running 3 heavy armor pieces on the body. So I've got the chest piece, I've got the legs here and the feet, all in heavy armor. That's going to give us the most resistances possible. All impenetrable as the trait, and then I have 2 tri-stat enchantments on the chest and on the legs. So for the second 5-piece set, I decided to go with something that would give me a lot of flat stats that I could work with, so that I could switch around some of my glyphs and things like that. So the best choice I think for that is going to be Bright Throats. This is a light armor set from the Murkmire DLC. You can get this from guild traders, though it can be a little bit pricey. You can also farm it yourself if you want. So I'm using 2 light pieces on the body. The best for that is going to be hands and waist. That's going to give you the best optimization of your resistances, having 5 heavy, 2 light. So Impen would be the best trait for those. You could also do a couple well-fitted. That would be fine. Max Magicka, since they are smaller pieces. Then I'm running that on the jewelry. So if you're not familiar with this set, it's basically the Magicka version of the Bone Pirate set. So you have 2 Max Magicka bonuses. You have 1 Magicka Recovery. And then for the 5-piece bonus, while you have a drink buff active, your Max Magicka is increased by about 2k and Magicka Recovery by about 150. But you do need a drink active for that. So the way that I am proccing that is going to be through this spring-loaded infusion, which is tri-stat, but it is a drink. So I felt like I wanted that extra stamina, especially for PvP. It's important, especially in Battlegrounds where your stat pools will be a little bit less. You really want that stamina. So you could do Witch Mothers as an alternate there, but your stamina will be really low unless you're running like all tri-stat enchants, tri-stat glyphs maybe. But I prefer this spring-loaded infusion. So that's how I'm getting that to work. Waist and hands, like I said there, for the light armor, and then just all jewelry to make up the 5-piece. What I recommend on this is because your max Magicka is going to be really high, sitting close to 40k, you can sub out some traits here. If you can trait change those, what I would recommend is probably 2 protective and maybe 1 infused. So I don't have all the gems yet to do that, but I do have 1 protective, and that is definitely helpful. You can do another as protective, and then your third could be infused, or you could just leave it as arcane if you want. So I have 2 Magicka recovery, 1 spell damage on that. And then for our final set, the monster set, the 2-piece, I'm using Heavy Valkynscoria. This is just kind of the classic Magicka Templar burst set. It really is helpful because we're running almost all damage over time. And you can see here for the monster set effect, when you deal damage, with damage over time, you proc that nice flame damage meteor. Still undodgeable, does really good burst damage. And the extra max health on the 1-piece is really nice for PvP also. So I think this is still really good on the setup. So you'll want 2 pieces of heavy armor for that, both in pen if you can manage that. And I would recommend Magicka on the shoulder piece, and then either Magicka or tri-stat on the headpiece. I think that about covers it. Did I do the glyphs? Yeah, Berserker glyph back bar, double damage poison on the front bar. Yeah, I think that covers that. All right, let's jump into the skills because a few things have changed. A few things got nerfed, a few things got buffed, so let's talk about that. First skill, Radiant Glory, got buffed. I believe it was in the Murkmire patch. So in previous builds, I didn't use this, especially on a heavy armor setup, because it was pretty costly, but they actually reduced the cost and they reduced the channel time. So I really like this now for PvP on heavy armor Magicka Templar. It doesn't cost that much anymore. It's quick. And you can do it from max range. So it's very nice to get those kills in, either finishing off an enemy that you're meleeing or full range, doesn't matter. It's a great skill. This is the healing morph, so we get a little bit of healing back on that. I definitely prefer that for PvP. I don't think the extra damage would be too much of a difference. Next up, Toppling Charge. I decided to switch my morph. I did do the non-stunning morph with this in a previous build, and that's for a few different reasons. I decided to go with the stun morph on this one, so we get a nice upfront bit of damage, gap close, and a nice stun. It also will interrupt and set them off balance if they're casting, so really, really nice skill, nice gap closer. With the stun as well. So the stun does have a minimum range, so you can't do it point blank. You do have to be, you can see about 3 meters away to be able to proc the stun on somebody. But I do like this skill for the gap close, and just the stun kind of helps with executing our burst combo. Next up, Elusive Mist. This is still really good on the Magicka Templar. I think you get the damage reduction, you get the movement speed, and it's giving you snare immunity and throwing off all snares, roots on you. So basically, this is your escape tool if you're getting rooted, if you're getting tons of snares dropped on you. Hit this skill, get some line of sight, get around a corner, pillar, whatever it is, and just kind of reset. Make sure your defensive buffs are up, and you can go back on the offensive. So it's a really great skill to have. I definitely recommend it. For the Magicka Templar build. Next will be Puncturing Sweeps. This is our just basic spammable on the build damage over time. Gives a nice little snare and bonus damage if the enemy's right in front of you. And you get the healing, 42% of the damage done. So this build is basically like a melee Templar build because of this skill. You do have a couple of range skills though, so you can use those if you need to, like Radiant Glory, for example. But for the most part, you'll be gap closing with toppling charge and then going into sweeps. Next up is Purifying Light. You definitely want this skill on your front bar, I think, because you'll just apply this first. It has a 6-second duration, and then you get a nice burst of damage at the end of that 6 seconds. The important thing to note is that it copies damage, but not just your damage, okay? It copies all damage from anybody else that's damaging your target. So this can burst down for a lot of damage. If you time this with your sweeps, and then as soon as that Purify procs go into execute, really, really nice combo to execute some kills on the build. For the ultimate, I'm still going with Dawnbreaker of Smiting. You can choose to run Crescent Sweep here, which is the other morph of Empowering Sweep. Crescent Sweep did get buffed where it's doing magic damage, and it does quite a bit of damage as well, but I still find it kind of buggy, especially with the AoE. Like if the target's not right in front of you, you'll miss a lot of the times, which I don't like. Dawnbreaker seems to just have a wider radius, a wider cone. And I like the fact that it does an AoE stun. So it's really good when fighting it against 2 or 3 people. If they're not on CC cooldown, you can hit Dawnbreaker, proc that stun, and then just basically sweep up the rest. So I do prefer this. When we're talking about no CP with Battlegrounds without CP enabled, it's still going to do a lot of damage. So you can think about what you prefer there. I'm still liking Dawnbreaker in this spot. Let's go ahead and jump to the back bar. So Vampire's Bane is just a nice damage over time. Basically the way I will do this is I will start a fight on my back bar with Vampire's Bane and then a light attack. So you can see I'm proccing my Berserker Glyph, and I'm also proccing my Major Prophecy, which is 10% spell critical. I did that because I had to drop Mage Light on this build. I no longer had room for Mage Light because of all the skills. Templar just has so many good skills that I wanted to run. I didn't have room for Mage Light anymore, and I didn't want to pay for potions that were that expensive, so this is a really good option. You get the nice damage over time, which as you can see can proc Valkynscoria really easily, and then it gives you that nice crit bonus, so really good skill there. Next up, Total Dark. So Total Dark got a bit of a nerf. I believe it was in Murkmire, where it used to be that you could put Total Dark on an enemy, and you could still hit them with a CC like Javelin or Dawnbreaker of Smiting or Toppling Charge, and you could still do that. But with the way that they changed this skill, as soon as you hit Total Dark on your target, they're immediately given CC immunity. Okay, so that's something that you need to think about. You're not going to use Total Dark anymore as like an offensive skill where you hit them with Total Dark and then go into a stun, because it's not going to work anymore. But I still think this is one of the best defensive skills in the game, and so I still wanted it on my back bar. That's one of the reasons why I had to drop Mage Light, because I like this skill so much for defense. So in cases where a Nightblade drops on me out of stealth, or I have like a Stamina Warden, Stamina Templar just doing tons of burst damage on me, you can block, hit them with Total Dark, and then you can heal. Okay, so not only will you be healing from your Total Dark, from your self-heal, they'll also be doing a lot of damage to themselves. So you can see here on the tooltip, 7,400 magic damage each time they use a direct damage attack. So think about somebody like a Stamina Templar hitting you with jabs. Each of those is going to hit them back for 7k damage. So what it does is it really pushes people back on the defensive, gives you a chance to recover, hit your buffs, get some line of sight, whatever, and then go offensive on them. Kind of where I got the name of the build, Backlash, is you can very easily go from offensive to defensive with Total Dark, healing, start pushing that damage back on them, and then go back on the offensive. So I really like the skill. Still, even with the nerf, but just keep in mind how it's changed. You're not going to be able to proc a stun before it ends anymore. You need to think of it more of like a defensive skill, and that's really what it's good for. So for our heal, Honor the Dead just gives us some nice Magicka back over time. So you get 60% of the cost back over 6 seconds. So spamming this is not going to be that helpful because you're not going to get that cost back as much, but hitting that 1 or 2 times is going to be pretty good. So it is a great self-heal, and then you can use this to heal some of your allies too if you're in a battlegrounds or something like that. It's useful for that, definitely. Then we just got our 2 buffs. Extended Ritual obviously gives us the Cleanse, 5 harmful effects, which is really good with some of the bleed damage, the dot damage meta that's going on right now. You definitely want to cleanse that off. Cleanse into a heal, right? So Cleanse will get rid of those 5 effects that are ticking on you, and then you can heal up right away. And then one of the best defensive buffs in the game, Channel Focus. You get your Rune, which gives you Major Ward, Major Resolve, but also an extra 50% spell resistance on top of that. So remember to stay in this if you're fighting, especially multiple enemies, because you're going to get that nice close to 30k resist on that within your Rune. But then also the really nice thing, obviously, is the Magicka recovery here. 240 Magicka every 1 second. That's about 500 Magicka recovery on the stat sheet, even though it doesn't show up there. That's why our buffed recovery is basically over 2k. So again, very good skill to have. Always have this up and try to stay in the Rune if you can. And then Empowering Sweep is just a nice defensive ultimate. So I talked about the defensive combo. You want to run Total Dark, block, hit a heal, and then that's going to give you major protection for 6 seconds, and then it scales up the more targets you hit, the longer it lasts. So we're not using it for damage, we're using it for the major protection, just helping us stay alive a little bit longer. It's a really good defensive ultimate. Okay, so that covers the skills. Let's see, I talked about defense. Let me show the offensive combo really quickly. If you're new to Magicka Templar, this might be helpful. So starting on the back bar, obviously make sure your Rune is up. And then how you want to engage a target is with Vampire's Bane for that dot. And then a light attack on the back bar. So that procs our buffs, right? Our spell damage and our spell crit. And then bar swap, Purifying Light, which has a 6-second duration. And then you'll want to just gap close into jabs. And then execute. So just the main thing to keep in mind is that Purifying Light, that burst damage happens after 6 seconds. So you'll want to get your target really close to execute range, have that Purify pop, and then hit them with that execute. So again, Purify, gap close, they'll be stunned, do a couple of jabs here. Purifying Light pops, hopefully you get a Valken to proc, and then execute. And that's basically how you can do that. For sustain, heavy attack if you need to. That's nice because it will also proc that poison, so you can kind of do that first. Proc a poison before you go into your damage rotation. That'll give you some nice damage as well. Okay, so champion points really quick. If you want to run it in the champion point campaign, feel free to do so. I did set it up more with a battlegrounds focus, but I think it would work pretty well. Something like this, something close to this. So. And this is set up for 810, which is currently the cap still for CP. 40 into Warlord, 25 Sprinter, 37 Tenacity, 75 Arcanist, 43 into Mooncalf, 26 Shadow Ward. You do a fair bit of blocking. 23 into Tumbling for those roll dodges, 27 into Blessed, 37 Elfborn, 56 Elemental Expert, 44 Spell Erosion. You do want to pump this up a little bit because we are heavy armor. Staff Expert, 11, just for those light and heavy attacks. Master Arms, 23. Thaumaturge, the majority of your damage is coming from damage over time. So I think that makes the most sense. Just buff that up. In the red tree, 56 Ironclad, 46 into Resistant. 56 into Hardy, 49 into Elemental Defender, 13 into Thick Skinned. Remember, you do have Cleanse, so ideally you want to cleanse that instead of taking that damage. 27 into Quick Recovery, and then 23 into Heavy Armor Focus. This gives you physical resistance, which is going to give you a nice balance of spell and physical since you get extra spell resistance as a Templar. Well, that's going to just about wrap it up for the Backlash Magicka Templar PvP build. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, remember to smash that like button for me. It really does help out. Your likes and your comments really help these videos get noticed and help the channel to grow, so I always appreciate that. Speaking of the channel, if you're not subscribed yet, why the heck not? It's free and I put out build videos just about every week, so there's always something new to look forward to as a subscriber. I won't tell you what my next build video is going to be, but I'll give you a hint. It will be a stamina class and it will be a PvP build. So stay tuned for that soon, and until then, I will see you around in the next video. Thanks.